You ever get that feeling that no matter how many hours you grind, your bank account just doesn't reflect the effort? It's like the math isn't mathing. You're not lazy, you're not careless. So what's missing? Here's the thing. Nobody ever told you you're playing a game, but no one handed you the rulebook. That game is life, and specifically the part about how money actually works. Let's flip the script. What if money isn't something you earn, but something you attract? Not a reward for labor, but a reflection of alignment. That's where ancient wisdom from the Kabbalah steps in, offering a very different take. This isn't about dogma or dry spiritual theory. It's about energy, flow, frequency. It's about how the universe speaks in vibrations and listens through intention. Money, according to this lens, isn't really cash. It's light, literal spiritual light. It's energy that flows to people who are in tune with it. Think of money like water, trying to find the right shape to fill. If your soul's energy is cluttered, cloudy, or misaligned, the flow stops. Not because you're unlucky, but because your vessel can't hold it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever received an unexpected payment, a refund you forgot about, or an opportunity that seemed to appear out of nowhere? Just when you needed it? That wasn't luck, that was alignment. That was your internal energy, briefly syncing with the greater current of abundance. This ancient wisdom teaches that every transaction, every coin, every client carries a spark, a piece of something higher. And when you show up in the world with integrity, when you treat even the smallest exchange as sacred, you're not just making a living, you're becoming a channel for light to enter the world. So instead of constantly asking, how do I make more? Maybe a better question is, how much of the universe's energy am I truly ready to receive? Here's a metaphor for you. Imagine trying to pour a waterfall into a teacup. The water's not the problem. The container is. If your vessel, your soul, your mindset, your heart is small, no matter how much abundance is available, most of it will spill over. Worse, it could overwhelm you. That's why so many people who suddenly come into wealth, lottery winners, overnight success stories, lose it just as fast. The vessel wasn't prepared to carry the current. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about energy responsibility. Gratitude expands your inner space. Intentions clarify the signal you send out, and purity of purpose clears out the static. The more aligned you are, the more light you can hold. And where there's light, there's flow. Where there's flow, money follows. Think of your soul as a container, like a cup, a bowl, or even a light bulb. Now imagine trying to pour a river into it, or forcing it to glow with the power of a lighthouse. What happens? It either cracks under pressure, or simply can't hold it. That's exactly what happens when we ask the universe for abundance without building the space inside to handle it. You see, this isn't just about saying affirmations or visualizing success. It's about inner readiness. Most people pray for huge breakthroughs without doing the internal rewiring needed to handle those blessings, and when those blessings don't show up, they blame fate. But fate isn't the issue. Capacity is. Let's break it down. If your inner world is only able to process a little bit of joy, peace, or purpose, it doesn't matter how much wealth tries to enter. It can't stick. It bounces off. Not because you're undeserving, but because you're not yet capable of holding it. Now here's where the real work begins. Expanding your vessel isn't about doing more. It's about becoming more. It's about developing deeper appreciation for what you already have. It's practicing intention before action. It's cleaning out the old, bitter, doubtful parts of yourself so light has somewhere to land. Picture a dusty, cracked jar. Would you pour crystal clear spring water into it? Probably not. The universe works the same way. Until you repair the cracks, resentment, greed, fear, and wipe away the dust, disbelief, self-doubt, ego, you won't be able to contain the beauty it's trying to give you. The process doesn't require perfection, but it does require presence. Gratitude is a powerful expander. So is silent service. So is being generous without expecting anything in return. These aren't moral rules. They're energy upgrades. They enlarge your soul's bandwidth. They stretch your spiritual skin, and just like going to the gym increases physical strength, showing up for these practices daily increases your ability to absorb and carry divine energy. Because here's the truth. Abundance isn't withheld. It's always flowing. The question is, are you spacious enough to receive it? Here's a mind shifter. You're not the producer of money, you're the receiver. That's a hard truth in a world that idolizes hustle, but it's a truth that frees you. Most of us were taught that if we work harder, plan smarter, and keep total control, the results will follow. But what if that very control is what's shutting the door? What if all that grasping is actually blocking the flow? In spiritual terms, real prosperity begins when we stop pretending to be the source. You're not manufacturing wealth. You're opening yourself to it. That means stepping into a partnership, not a dictatorship. The more you release the need to dictate every outcome, the more room the universe has to work with you, not against you. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful energetic tools in that partnership, tithing. Yeah, giving away part of your income on purpose. But this isn't about guilt or charity. This is high-level energetic mechanics. When you consciously take a portion of what you receive, say 10% or even 20%, and give it away with a clean heart, you're doing something radical. You're detaching ego from wealth. You're purifying the flow. You're turning stagnant possession into circulating light. Think of it like opening a valve. As long as you're holding everything tightly, the energy becomes stale. But when you share with grace, the system breathes. And because the universe flows in cycles, the first one to be replenished is always the channel that kept things moving. That's you. But here's the secret ingredient: intention. Throwing money around isn't the same as sacred giving. When you give with awareness, when your offering carries purpose, humility, and love, it transforms. That money becomes energy. That energy becomes momentum. And that momentum circles back in the form of unexpected blessings, open doors, and magnetic opportunities. You're not giving to lose. You're giving to keep the current alive. Once you understand this, wealth stops being a chase and becomes a conversation, a dialogue between you and the divine. And every time you give from that sacred place, you're not subtracting. You're investing in a flow that never runs dry. Every bit of income that enters your life carries a silent question. What will you turn me into? That question isn't about spreadsheets or budgets. It's about energy, purpose, integrity. See, not all money is created equal, not energetically. At least, the source matters, the intention matters, and most importantly, the impact of how that money came to you. It matters deeply. If wealth is earned through deception, manipulation, or the mistreatment of others, it carries a residue, a kind of invisible heaviness. What looks like success on paper may actually be a spiritual liability. It clings to your energy field like static, quietly disrupting your peace, your relationships, even your sleep. Kabbalistic wisdom doesn't just label dishonest earnings as bad. It warns that they create chaos. They invite confusion, imbalance, and blockage. They lower your vibration and shrink your vessel. And over time, they choke the flow of true abundance. But the opposite is just as powerful. When your income is rooted in honesty, when your deals are built on mutual respect, and your business becomes a vehicle for elevating others, you're not just making money. You're liberating spiritual sparks trapped in the material world. You're participating in something higher than a transaction. You're becoming a bridge between heaven and earth. It might sound poetic, but it's also deeply practical. When you pay fair wages, when you treat clients with dignity, when you view each sale as a moment of service rather than just profit, that's spiritual commerce. And the universe notices. It doesn't just reward generosity, it responds to purity. Each ethical act becomes a magnet, a bright signal that tells the universe, I'm ready to carry more light. I'm safe with power. I honor the flow. So the question isn't just how much you make, but how you made it. Because money earned with integrity doesn't just grow your bank account, it expands your soul. We often look at our bank balance to measure abundance, but rarely do we look at our relationships. And yet the truth is, how you treat others directly affects how energy flows into your life. Think about it. Have you ever noticed that when you're holding a grudge, being disrespectful, or ignoring someone who once helped you, things in your life just stall? That isn't coincidence. It's a signal, a blockage. Energetically, disrespect is like pouring dirt into your spiritual pipeline. The light can't move. The flow gets tangled. One of the most overlooked teachings in spiritual prosperity is this: disrespect, especially toward key figures in your life like your mother, elders, or those you're indebted to, shuts things down. These people aren't just symbolic. They represent roots. And when you damage your roots, the tree can't grow. Even small things matter. Avoiding a repayment, speaking harshly to someone who once supported you, taking without appreciation. These actions may seem harmless on the surface, but energetically, they seal off important doors. But here's the beauty, those doors can be reopened. Sometimes a simple apology is all it takes to restart the flow. Not because you owe anyone a performance, but because humility is a cleanser. It clears the channel. Forgiveness, whether asking for it or offering it, is an activator. It clears the stagnant waters inside you. It allows movement, opportunity, and light to re-enter your field. Because at the end of the day, money doesn't just follow ideas or strategy, it follows alignment. And part of alignment means restoring respect where it's been lost. So take a moment, reflect. Is there anyone you need to honor again? A situation you need to make right? That one conversation you've been avoiding might just be the key to unblocking the abundance you've been praying for. Wealth flows where respect lives. Let's get real. Knowing how energy works is one thing. Living it daily, that's where the transformation happens. You don't need grand rituals or rare crystals. What you do need is consistency, intention, and a heart that shows up, even when results aren't immediate. Let's begin with the first habit. Start your morning with declaration, not desperation. Before you even check your phone, plant this seed in your mind. I am a channel for limitless abundance. Say it like you mean it, like your soul is tuning its frequency to receive what it was always meant to carry. That sentence isn't magic. It's alignment. It's you telling your energy field, let's open the gates. And then remind your deeper self of this truth. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. That phrase isn't about religion. It's about removing scarcity from your thoughts. Lack is a mindset, but so is sufficiency. This tiny mental shift reorients your focus from chasing to receiving. Next, gratitude. Not generic, not passive, personal. Every morning, think of 3 very specific things that blessed you the day before. A kind message, a last-minute discount, a smile that caught you off guard. Name them, feel them. Gratitude expands what you can hold. Then turn your attention to what you do. Whether you're managing a store, crafting something with your hands, or guiding people through services, ask yourself, is my work helping someone rise today? If it is, then you're not just earning, you're elevating. Every task, every effort becomes sacred when fueled by contribution. Another essential practice. Guard your dreams like they're seedlings, because they are. And seedlings need fertile, undisturbed ground to grow. Not everyone has the eyes or energy to nurture your visions, so in the early stages, keep your ideas sacred, quiet. Let them root before they bloom. Protecting your energy also means knowing when to pause. Sit in silence. Write. Breathe. Ask yourself, what spiritual practice am I starting today? Write it down. Commit to it. Make it yours. And remember, your goal isn't to chase money. It's to become a magnet for light. The currency will follow. But first, the soul must glow. So you're doing the work, thinking differently, acting with purpose, even giving from the heart, but still the flow feels stuck. Why? Sometimes what holds us back isn't visible. It hides in the subtle details, the quiet places where we forget to look. And often the blockage isn't external. It's internal energy left unexamined. Let's start with something many people overlook: giving without soul. If you're donating money just to tick a spiritual checkbox, mechanically, without emotion or connection, it doesn't carry energy. Giving should be alive. It should mean something. Without intention, generosity becomes empty movement. But when you attach purpose to your offering, I'm giving to purify, to circulate, to bless, it becomes a spiritual transaction. And that kind of giving echoes back to you with force. Another common block? Impatience. You want results now, this week, today, but every seed has a cycle. If you dig it up too soon, you kill the process. The universe doesn't operate on human deadlines. It moves with precision, preparing you while you think you're being ignored. Pushing too hard before you're energetically ready is like forcing a flower to bloom. Too early, and it wilts. And then there's doubt, the most silent saboteur. So of all, when you question whether you're worthy of wealth, when you wonder if it's even possible for you, you shrink. Not your abilities, your spiritual space. And a small vessel can't hold big blessings. Every "what if it doesn't" work tightens your channel. Every "maybe this isn't for me" dims your signal. But here's the truth. If the desire to expand lives in you, then the path to fulfillment already exists. It's not a matter of if, But when you align, still, life gets heavy sometimes, everything seems to fall apart. Plans collapse, hope dims, and that's when most people give up. But what if those breakdowns were the universe breaking you open, rebuilding your shape so you can carry more light? According to Kabbalah, collapse often comes right before the leap. The night is darkest before it releases the dawn. When everything is crumbling, it may be life's way of asking, are you finally ready to rise differently? Instead of panicking, try something bold. Give thanks for what hasn't made sense yet. Trust the process that's making space within you, because growth often feels like loss before it becomes light. There comes a point on this journey where the conversation goes deeper, beyond thoughts, beyond habits, into the unseen codes behind reality itself. This is where Kabbalah lifts the veil and reveals some of its most mysterious truths. Let's start with gematria, the sacred system that gives numbers spiritual meaning. In this ancient practice, every letter, word, and name carries a numerical frequency. It's not superstition. It's a hidden language the universe uses to communicate. Take the number 18, for example. In Hebrew, it symbolizes chai, life. So when that number appears, whether on a receipt, a contract date, or even in a bank account, it may not be random. It could be a signal, an energetic yes from the universe. Ever made a decision on a specific day and felt like everything flowed effortlessly? Or noticed how some numbers seem to follow you when things go well? That's not luck, it's alignment. Numbers speak when you listen, and gematria is how you learn to hear them. This isn't just spiritual trivia, it's practical magic. You can begin to pay attention to the signs around you, the timing of a purchase, the digits in a deal, even the vibration behind a name. There are clues everywhere for those who are willing to see. Now let's talk about influence, not from the stars, but from the people you surround yourself with. Energy is contagious. Spend time with those stuck in scarcity, fear, or jealousy, and you'll start to feel heavy, drained, unsure. It's like trying to breathe fresh air in a room full of smoke. But shift your circle, align with generous souls, dreamers, builders, givers, and everything changes. Your vision sharpens, your spirit lifts, your energy multiplies. Why? Because we are all energetic nodes in a larger grid. Every person you interact with either strengthens your signal or scatters it. And the more conscious you are of who you link to, the clearer your path becomes. The truth is, company isn't neutral. It either expands your light or dims it. So ask yourself, who's in your space? Do they fuel your growth or feed your fear? Are they mirrors of your highest self or shadows that keep you small? This isn't about cutting people off. It's about choosing your direction. Your soul is always in motion. Make sure it's flowing where the light leads. And if this message stirs something inside you, don't ignore it. These aren't just words, they're invitations to listen differently, to move with intention, to align not just your actions, but your energy. Because when you live in sync with the deeper rhythms of the universe, wealth stops being a struggle and becomes a response.